I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Michael Jansen, Chief Research Officer, guides the practice's research agenda and architecture by leveraging his extensive experience to identify and unlock emerging trends. Rajesh Ranan, partner, leads Everest Group's Business Process Services Syndicated and advisory practice globally. He is responsible for overall growth of the practice in terms of revenue, client relationship management, market influence, and talent mentoring. Arco, Vice President, is a leader of the Business Process Services team and assists clients on topics related to entire HR and talent services value chain. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Michael.
Hello, everybody. I'm coming to you from the latest third world country called Texas. For most of you, probably heard the stories we're going through right now, and it is absolutely true. I'm delighted to have power and internet since 10 o'clock last night, but it's not been the same for the last, let's say, 3 or 4 days. So my only urging here is we are recovering. Please send plumbers to Texas is all I could ask for right now. We are going to, when all this thaw comes, we're going to have lots of needs for plumbers with all the leaky pipes. So anyway, let's get started with the content here. As we think about 2020, 2021, and the issues we're dealing with from a business standpoint, probably the number one thing that comes to mind is the challenge of changing customer expectations. And so as we think about this industry, how do we deal with the expectation for changing business models, and how do we challenge ourselves to service customers? And with COVID, it just accelerated the expectations or the need to make those changes. We've also got things around technology and the disruptions that's caused at the accelerating pace. We've got changes in the workforce, whether those be in just the demographics and the globalness of the workforce, but also the way that we're contracting and building our getting resources, whether it be full-time or other contractual contingent workforce mechanisms. Certainly, the geopolitical environment's been challenging. I could go through a long, long list of things there. I think probably most of you know, we had a fairly interesting election here in the U.S. But the other part of this dynamic is really the risk management. And I know Rajesh and myself and Arco have all dealt with a lot of calls from clients that have been asking about, how stable is the financial performance of my suppliers, and are they going to be ready for me? Are they going to be there for me? And I think we have some good news on that. But risk management's been a new thing that we've added to the mix here in terms of considerations for this industry. So Rajesh, talk to us about where we're getting this data.
Yeah, so again, good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. So we really leveraged a combination of a lot of primary research and IP that we collect or create through our ongoing work in the BPS space. In addition to that, we also did a specific outreach along with NASSCOM to understand what stakeholders' experience and expectations are from BPS. So as you can see, combination of Everest Group and NASSCOM BPS survey, along with a significant amount of other relevant surveys and research, which collectively put together were 550 unique respondents across diverse industries, enterprise size, and geographies. 55% of them C-level executives or head of functions. So it kind of really leverages a wide section of the stakeholder group and relevant stakeholder group across third-party providers as well as GBS organizations, in addition to a lot of our IP that we create on an ongoing basis.
So bottom line here, this is a pool of insights and data collected from a whole lot of different sources, both from enterprise, the market, and the supplier community. So that's great. Let's tell the story that we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about the BPS marketplace so far. We're going to talk about what is BPS 4.0. We're going to talk about the key implications, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. We always get lots and lots of questions, so feel free to submit those in the panel for Zoom, and we'll take those as we go, or probably get a lot of them at the very end, or we'll try to. So with that, let's talk about what I know that we talk about BPS 1, 2, 3. Let's talk about what those represent over the last 20 years, and and then we'll start to evolve into the conversation of where we're going.
No, thanks, Michael. So as Michael was alluding to, clearly the BPS industry has undergone a successful evolution in the last couple of decades to satisfy business requirements, changing business needs. The first version was really BPS 1.0. We all know kind of started with arbitrage as a primary lever focused on cost reduction. And the functional coverage was largely focused on F&A and contact center. Then the next iteration, next evolution happened, wherein the value proposition evolved to efficiency, providing greater quality, leveraging Lean and Six Sigma principles and concepts, and the functional coverage again expanded to services beyond F&A. So it started to include HR and procurement, and some industry-specific services also started to come in. Then, as we started to enter the digital era, it led to the next wave of cost efficiency and quality improvement. But in addition to that, we also, as an industry, started to kind of tap into the data part of the equation to provide at least, basic analytics, not very sophisticated, but started moving that journey. And also, the experience part of the picture started to come into play. The lever, as I mentioned, is of course the tech part, digital part, and next level of domain. And the functional coverage continued to expand beyond horizontal industry-specific functions and services. Also led to new generation of services that continue to come along.
Yeah, I think I first did the first HR outsourcing chart. There were 10 deals in the industry, and it was like in 2001 or 2002. So it has certainly been an interesting evolution, and I'm excited about where we're going forward.
Yeah. And for sure, as the industry has demonstrated value across different iterations and evolutions, the industry has grown and grown very nicely, right? 12.5% CAGR to close to $250 billion. That has been a pretty good growth, cut it from any angle.
Okay, great. So let's get some input from our audience here, and let's ask them where they think they're represented in kind of the spectrum here from BPS 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and if you're beyond that. So we're going to open up a quick poll, and we're getting lots and lots of responses. So I'd encourage you to make a quick vote. We'll leave it open for about another 15, 20 seconds. And okay, it's interesting here. Well, the good news is nobody has chosen BPS 1.0, so that's good. Rajesh, I think you'll be happy to see those answers. All right. Kier, can you publish the poll so we can see the answers? All right. Rajesh, almost two-thirds there in the BPS 3.0, and you got some wings there in the 2.0 and the beyond.
Yeah,
what was your expectations?
Yeah, kind of matches some of my expectation, though I was expecting some of them possibly still in the arbitrage. Few minor, right? But it kind of matches some of my expectations. Also interesting to see that 17% are saying that, hey, we are already beyond all these levels, right? Which is in a way kind of precursors to BPS 4.0 that we're going to talk about. But yeah, kind of matches some of our expectation and some of our experience so far.
Okay, good. All right, well, we got a good input from where the audience is there, and lots and lots of votes there, so I appreciate that. All right, let's move on in terms of how we did, let's set context for the industry as an overall. And having been part of this industry for 3+ decades, I am really happy with the way we came through the COVID crisis. And so one of the things we do in this industry is we talk about partnership, and we talk about your supplier and your service providers being partners in the equation. And so one of the key attributes of a partnership is what happens when things go wrong. And so we did what you see on the left here just at the end of this last year, and we asked companies how they thought about their relationships and how their service providers performed during the crisis. And what you're going to see there is pretty good results. 92% of of our respondents were either neutral, but more than likely to be satisfied or highly satisfied with their service provider during the performance of this challenge we had last year. Yes, there were challenges. We're not going to say that there was, everything went perfect, and there were some of them were specific industries that were more impacted by others. There were certain geographies that were more impacted. I think specifically we had some challenges with voice out of the Philippines because of the way their backup plans were set up or not set up. But overall, I'm very thrilled and very proud of this industry to come through it like this.
No, absolutely, Michael. And that is getting reflected in the industry growth on the right side of this page, right? Clearly, yeah, we talk about, hey, there's going to be U-shaped recovery in this economy, V-shaped, K-shaped, what all, different alphabets that we throw in. But in case of BPS, it's clearly showing a V-shaped recovery, right? As you can see from the chart on the right side of this page. While we are still kind of collating the Q4 2020 data, but the early results already show that it is sustaining. In fact, it is improving. So again, further validates the point that the industry actually demonstrated strong resilience in the face of COVID-19. It seems to be kind of moving in the direction where a lot of opportunities that we believe are going to come can be captured.
Yeah, and Rajesh, this is the revenue view. I know you and your team have produced margin views as well, and when we look at those have actually been pretty impressive too. In fact, we've actually seen stability in the industry, and again, very proud that the industry is able to manage through the crisis and keep strong financial footing so that it's not a question of is this industry going to fail or is it going to be challenged with ability to make future investments. And quite the contrary here. It's going to accelerate, as you see on the revenue side, and hopefully that the value propositions that are provided for our clients continue to improve. And that's what the BPS 4.0 is all about.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is this BPS 4.0 all about here? Just give us a little bit of a kind of a bird's eye view of what you guys are seeing here, and what do you guys expect to happen?
Yeah, I mean, again, just to kind of reflect back, and I talked about 3 stages of evolution on BPS 3.0, and yes, it created value, but essentially COVID accelerated our entry into the BPS 4.0, where really the opportunity is to create transformative value for stakeholders through what we are calling a 5D approach. But before we get into the 5D approach, let's try to understand what are those key components of the value proposition that we are talking about here, right? And therefore, that we specifically want to call out. First, of course, the risk mitigation and increasingly resiliency has come to the forefront post-COVID. So BPM 4.0 promises to deliver these, making organizations more agile to respond to the challenges and opportunities faster. The second one is really this exponential efficiencies across the board. Now, driving efficiency has been synonymous with BPM industry. Again, we talked about this. What BPM 4.0 promises is to really take it to the next level. It calls for moving from unit cost reduction to dramatically reduce the overall cost to serve. Further, it promises to impact the business outcome, which goes significantly beyond just the cost imperative. It is about accelerating speed to market, driving differentiation, and essentially creating tangible top-line impact. Now, the top-line impact part is really important as it relates to BPM 4.0, given the traditional focus on the bottom line in the previous generations. And we already see some encouraging movement in that direction, with organizations starting to seek help on what we call revenue operations, which is a combination of marketing operations, sales operation, and customer onboarding or customer success. And lastly, as we see enterprises trying to achieve these objectives and providers trying to kind of fulfill those, creating superior stakeholder experience will be at the front and center. It also ties back to the first place where Michael started around, evolving customer expectations. Some of those things may be in the B2C world, but clearly in the B2B world, that is coming right at the front and center. And a lot of times experience part is talked about in end consumer facing activities and processes. typically front office in nature. But BPM 4.0 calls for creating this across the board, which span across front, mid, and back office enterprise functions. Right? And again, to make it happen, that is the place where the 5D approach comes in. You'll see there are three of these enabling levers, which are in blue color, while two of them are in orange. The three of them are kind of where they're pre-COVID as well, which is design thinking led, data and digital driven, domain centric. What is kind of changing and what we expect to change in BPM 4.0, BPS 4.0 is really the depth, breadth, and the pervasiveness of this, right? So when you talk about digital, it's not about just a pilot of an automation. It's about fundamentally different and at scale, which we'll kind of touch upon as we move along. Then on the two new levers that have come into play. One is, again, COVID actually brought that into the picture, which is distributed workforce. But with what is happening with automation, with all the possibilities around digital, there is actually a greater need for more talented, more skilled individuals and talent to join the BPS world, and that is going to be critical. And lastly, this BP Devops oriented is a concept we believe is going to be coming into the play when we are extending the concept of DevOps, which has been developed in the IT world, into the business process operation, and this combination, which can again drive that kind of agility and speed that enterprises will seek to again fulfill the value proposition, the four value propositions that we talked about. Again, we'll click on each one of them or double click on each one of them as we move along.
So Rajesh, just to be clear here, this is still the BPS 4.0 is not a replacement for BPS 1, 2, or 3. It's additive. It's an and conversation, right?
Exactly. All of these are kind of building one over other, right? But it is about, in a way, it's kind of not only raising the aspiration, which is true, but also capturing those. So, I mean, short answer, Michael, is yes. It kind of builds on what we have done. But again, it is about the opportunity that is there. And honestly, a lot of things which are coming together to kind of capture those opportunities.
Okay. All right, Arko, we're going to take you through each of these 5 different components here that Rajesh identified. Arko, start us off with the design thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So, as Rajesh mentioned, design thinking is not really new concept, right? We have all heard of it. It has already been used in BPS. What is changing is, how it's being applied across the various, factions or parts of BPS. So if I broadly look at it, 4 things are changing in BPS 4.0 vis-a-vis what was happening in terms of design thinking earlier. So first of all, we see now design thinking being applied everywhere, the front, back, and mid office functions, instead of just the front office functions where it was being applied earlier. The second is the superior experience for everyone involved. And the key word here is everyone, instead of just focusing on the end consumers or end customers. Now experience for every stakeholder who's touching this entire BPS becomes important. Third is hyper-personalization, something that we have come to experience in our daily lives in the digital world. We believe that will now come into the BPS world itself, and it will be important to strike the right balance between standardization and contextualization to create that hyper-personalized experience. And last but not the least, design thinking will also help in ultimately, doing process reengineering. Of course, the key objectives are improving experience, but COVID exposed a lot of these situations where a lot of processes had become redundant. So process reengineering can help move that or remove that. And similarly, as digital becomes more pervasive, there is an opportunity to eliminate a lot of touch points which actually hamper experience. So that is where design thinking will now be across all functions, all stakeholders, ultimately to create that much better experience.
Yeah, if I were to kind of add one thing here, then just to kind of make it real, I mean, 3 or 4 years back, as part of my conversation with a lot of the CFOs and, that organization, never heard about experience, right? But today, in most of the conversation, right, with CFO, this is coming into, when, I mean, at one level, when you talk to the CHROs, or, people who are responsible for the, for the front office part of the picture on the customer success side, yeah, I mean, we were hearing it. But, as Orko was mentioning, that here the principle of design thinking, principle of keeping the every stakeholder in mind and thinking about that persona and how can we improve that experience. If that is coming into one of the top priorities for CFO, which is kind of typically seen as kind of a back office, mid office part of the equation, that is very telling. Okay, so the second part is this data and digital, right? The two things that we wanted to kind of highlight as relates to BPS 4.0. One is the scale, and the second is the breadth or the pervasiveness. The left hand side of the, or left part of this page shows the kind of scale that has started to happen in terms of the bot deployment. I mean, at one level, it's still may still not look that much, but as we are kind of looking and collecting the data, it is really kind of moving in the right direction, right? And then that's just an example of how some of the pilots that were happening earlier now moving into the next iteration. The second part of this is actually shown on the right side, where we believe automation is just one of the tools. One has to think about various tools, technologies, and concepts that need to come together in a composable manner to unlock value across various layers, right? And across various objectives. So think about the performance layer, which is kind of, again, driven by the need to create the agility, automation layer, which is kind of driven by the need to drive efficiency, insight layer, to get better decision making power, and interaction layer. All these things kind of culminate into the experience part of the picture. The key point here is, as we move forward, this what we call digital capability platform, which is again a composable platform consisting of a lot of these tools and technologies, very rooted in the operations world, right? But with a kind of focus on creating value across the board. That is actually coming into play and will become much more important as we move along. And of course, the thing which kind of cuts across all these things is this entire cognitive and artificial intelligence part of the picture. But I think, Michael, you have a point here, right?
Yeah, I just think that AI is not a bubble. It's a thing that's going to impact all of these layers as people look for making them smarter and allowing the artificial intelligence to play into every single one of these layers and every single one of these bubbles on here. So I think it becomes a not just a component; it's pervasive across all areas. So
and then yeah. And sorry, one of the key things is, as Michael was mentioning, what really powers AI is really the data. Right?
Yeah.
And that is, if you think about this digital capability platform, think about the infusion of data and our ability to kind of ingest, clean, harvest, right? And unlock structured, unstructured, internal, external, dark metadata. That is really, really powerful. And we believe that is going to be really important. That's why we have called out data as a kind of a separate element from digital.
Yeah, no, if we look at one of our key issue studies for 2021, the availability and the cleanliness of data was the number one issue on that question. So.
Yeah, the third piece of the puzzle in terms of the 5D elements is the domain expertise that will be required to fulfill the promise. Again, domain was always important, but what is new or different in BPS 4.0 is the amalgamation or coming together of various types of domain expertise. So we believe process-oriented domain centricity, industry or sector-oriented domain centricity, as well as the technology-based domain centricity, all of these really need to come together and interlinked for the true value to be unlocked. So what do we mean by each of these? For example, process domain centricity. In BPS 4.0, and we'll talk about it later, the outsourcing will become, or services will become much deeper, going into much more strategic functions. For example, financial planning and analysis, or actuarial, or direct procurement. And these strategic functions require a much more deeper domain knowledge rather than just execution. Similarly, as these functions become more strategic, industry-specific or sector-specific nuances start to become more important. So providers, whether it's outsourcing providers or GBSs, they need to have that industry domain centricity to sort of unlock value. And then last but not the least, Rajesh and Michael spoke about technology and digital. That becomes very important. Having the domain over there in terms of bringing in the right technology elements is important, but even interesting nuances, right? How do you combine, say, technology and industry domain together? Or how do you combine technology and process domain together? For example, if someone is able to bring in a customized RP or pre-configured RPA solution, which is specifically geared towards the healthcare functions or towards finance functions, that really brings in that additional bit of value over here. And that is the sort of new thing within BPS 4.0, how all of these domains are working together and ultimately providing that context aware situation and unlocking the next level of value.
And then I can touch upon this BP business process DevOps concept, right? Again, if you look at the typical way teams are structured in organization, you have a IT operations, which is a different team. Development teams are different. Both are housed under IT, but they kind of are structured and possibly some of the silos that exist. And then BP operations is clearly different. Of course, there has been a significant amount of progress on the concept of DevOps, as it has, it originated in the IT world to kind of infuse the dev and the IT ops together. Now, the BP DevOps concept calls for extension of this into the business process operations, right? Because at the end of the day, as we develop some of these tools and technologies and we take it to the market, there are a lot of the processing that still needs to be done. There's a feedback loop that guys on the business process operation side who are actually collecting it. And when you extend that into the business process operations, the agility and speed of decision making becomes faster, right? And also kind of reflecting more of what is happening in the market or a particular context, particular situation. So actually it makes it much better. And it's not like, this is just a theoretical concept. We already see some organizations doing it, right? So, there's this financial services organization that we're talking to. They actually made sure that they had the DevOps concept, but they made sure that at least for a particular business function, they kind of broke that silo, and you have one team who's kind of working on that part of the equation. So yeah, it is not enterprise-wide pervasive, but at least on one business unit, it started to happen. And if you look at survey of what we are saying is, when we ask people, hey, how important this is going to be, I mean, quite a few are saying that it's going to be very important. Having said all these things, this is one place where possibly the needle has to move the most. Okay, but nonetheless, this is something that we see forthcoming, especially those organizations who want to capture the disproportionate value that is going to be available to capture.
And then the fifth lever, which is in some ways something new that COVID introduced, is talking about the workforce will deliver on these promises. So some things are pretty understandable over here. The talent required will be different. It will be pretty differentiated. since they'll be executing more strategic tasks, higher order tasks, more sort of exception handling rather than routine tasks. But some of the other interesting pieces that came out from our conversations with the CXOs of various BPS outsourcing providers and GBS organizations is many of them are expecting a mix of permanent and temporary or contingent workforce going ahead. And that may be for various reasons. Some of them expect it to manage volume fluctuations. Some of them are expecting it to help in getting some of those highly specialized skills. But there's a general consensus that probably more of temporary workforce will be used. And then last but not the least, the big change that COVID introduced is a combination of office and work from home model, and which we are now calling the hub, spoke, and edge model. We've always spoken about hub and spoke earlier, but now, the edge is the work from home part of it. And at least one part of BPS had already seen this being used quite extensively, even before COVID, which is the work at home agents model, which was being used on the contact center or customer experience side. And sort of everyone is expecting that to be the more dominant model, going ahead.
Yeah, Arko, I think this is probably the most, actually, in the very long term, this is the most impactful for at a personal level, how we do work and how we think about work, both from a personal standpoint, but then also how organizations purchase or acquire these resources. It's going to be very, very different going forward here. It's not going to be come to the corporate campus and we teach you our corporate culture, and then you stay there and you work for your 20, 30 years. I think we're long past that already, but I think the world is just it's going to be so changed, and the COVID has accelerated that change. So, all right, let's move on to the key implications. And so we just went through the what is BPS and the 5D dimensions of that. Let's take into the key implications here.
Yeah, so as we kind of think about this, and as you kind of touched upon that previously, we saw that the bottom up data, right? When we showed the V-shaped recovery, that is kind of bottom up data, right? That is what is happening on the ground, and we already see the acceleration and rapid recovery in the BPS marketplace. When we look at it from a top-down analysis, right, which is on the left side, what you see is we kind of just try to analyze the penetration of BPS vis-a-vis, let's say, IT services. Even the most mature function or area, contact center, is under-penetrated. So overall IT services penetration, our estimate is around 40%. The most mature, the biggest, the largest area of BPS, contact center outsourcing, is 30%. As you start to go down to other enterprise function, industry specific function, the penetration continues to come down, which essentially suggests that the headroom for growth here is significant. So now when you combine the bottom up picture that we showed with this top down, clearly there's a lot of opportunities to capture, right? And again, the right hand side kind of shows what is our expectation in terms of the growth. And at one level we feel that it is somewhat conservative, but nonetheless, right? So we are kind of, again, if you combine both the picture, you get the view that this industry is expected to grow and grow at a healthy pace over the next 5 years. And it's kind of interesting. Again, when automation came along, a lot of people kind of talked about the death of BPS or BPO or BPM, whatever term that we use. Contrary to that, enterprises, providers, the industry as a whole, really leverage that as a kind of a key tool to accelerate the value, right? And that is what is kind of happening. That is how the industry is kind of growing and creating more opportunities for everyone.
Yeah, Rajesh, you think about the complication here. We expected to drive more efficiency, so you're driving efficiency every year of X%, and at the same time be able to grow on top of that. So it's really a pretty impressive that you can keep on having the compounded numbers, and then you sort of think about the scale of those numbers there. That's that's $250 billion of revenue right now that's into this mix here.
Yep.
And so you're still getting growth compounded on top of that. So, all right, let's keep going.
And again, as Orko kind of touched upon that, right? I kind of, this is a double click view on it. You take any of the segments, right? There are new sub segments that are emerging, wherein BPS value can be created and delivered, right? So in F&A, it is around FP&A, tax and treasury, which is basically some of those areas where organizations in the past felt like they cannot leverage third party or their internal shared services GBS organization, or captives, whatever you want to call it, to places like industry specific areas where the risk adjustment part of the picture, the member engagement part of the picture that is coming in. So point here is, look at any BPS segments. There are new segments that are still emerging, which provides an opportunity for the entire industry to kind of capture value. Then as we look into the net new segments, can we talked about the marketing operation, the sales operation, especially again the digital actually coming into play, and COVID actually acting as an accelerator. The digital marketing, the digital sales naturally lends itself to BPS and BPO, and that is the place where we see movement, and some significant movement. And this is the place where when I was talking about opportunity to create top line impact, that is coming into play. Then trust and safety, the entire content moderation part of it, right? Where we all know how much of the content that is getting generated. There are these platforms where users can put out any content, and someone has to kind of look through that, parse that through. Big area, big growth that we are seeing. Even from an industry standpoint, of course, as I talked about content moderation, your fast growth technology companies, FGTs as we call it, come into play. But COVID actually has also created situations where government and public sector increasingly sought help and got the help from BPS providers, and that has actually opened a new set of new segment altogether, and potentially big segment. Now it has been happening in UK for some time, but now it has kind of really expanded to multiple geographies. So there are new industry sectors that are also emerging from a BPS standpoint, which BPS 4.0, and within BPS 4.0 we can capture.
All right, let's open this up to a little bit of input from the audience here. And so we're going to do another quick poll. Which of the following services are you considering for more outsourcing in 2021? So we're going to do this fast. Get your votes in right now. And interested in seeing which of the following you are considering going forward here. All right, the votes are coming in fast and furious. Okay, we have two clear leaders here. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and close the poll here in 3 seconds. Okay, great, and then let's publish it. All right, so Rajesh, I'm going to talk about well, you talk about the ones that are that got a lot of usage there, or got a lot of votes, and then I'll talk about the ones that didn't get so many votes.
Yeah. So of course, the enterprise services and the industry specific services. Of course, these are two of the, I would say, mature areas of the business process services. But as we saw, again, enough and more that can still happen. There are quite a few first time outsourcers who are coming into are coming into this this equation, this play, and then the existing ones who are kind of expanding their scope, right? Kind of intrigued to see contact center being that less. And that is the place, Michael, you may want to comment.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at that. I was going to comment exactly on that, because I know that when we're talking to the providers and they seem incredibly busy. So this may be a little bit of a mixed message here. I think we actually should probably take a little closer look at that and see if the intent on something like this in real time is pretty low. I know we had some hiccups there, but I also know that people also needed the contact centers that I was talking to, they were busy. So
not only busy, Michael, I can tell you, part of the big recovery that we have seen is actually driven by contact center. right?
Yeah.
And as we talk about contact center, there are two ways to talk about it. Again, the cheapest, lowest cost provider, and second is the opportunity to create customer experience. Again, going back to the part of the picture, and contact center honestly is really at the front and center of creating that customer experience. And when you combine that with the digital and data part of the equation, right, layer that with the the design thinking, this is one place where we are seeing transformative value being created, will be created. So yeah, I mean, this is somewhat surprising, but
Yeah.
hey,
I also see that there's a
we live in the COVID world, right? So surprises are kind of the norm.
yeah, the content moderation and marketing operations. I think those are more niche conversations, but we are definitely seeing, especially like content moderation. If you're in that business, it's a booming business right now because people try to deal with the implications of social. So, but not many clients care about that one, but those that do really care. Okay, all right, let's talk about the engagement as we start to think about this here. Service providers and enterprises really start talking about from not just execution but also moving to orchestration. Enterprises are also concerned about that their overall portfolio, and so can't tell you how many conversations that I've had with Amy and Jamit on this topic as we talk to enterprises about should they have more providers or less providers? Do they have the right providers? And so that overall portfolio view and the rebalancing there is in very active motion right now. And the preference for the hybrid operating model, I think, absolutely going to be there, and we see it in the not just in the GBS leading the way there. GBS is in other webinars I'm doing, we're seeing they're actually the growth engines of the enterprise right now as they to become more dominant in terms of driving leverage within the organizations and using outsourcing as a model to execute. But they're driving that conversation more so than we've ever seen before. So let's move on to the next slide here. Arko, talk to us about what you see.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the hybrid operating model seems to be becoming more popular. So, based on our survey, even before COVID, almost 25 of the enterprises are using some sort of a hybrid between shared services and outsourcing. And we now see it going up to probably more than half of enterprises, looking to move towards that sort of a model. People with only outsourcing providers now are thinking of setting up shared services, and those just leveraging shared services are now looking at outsourcing some parts of the work to external service providers. Essentially, everyone realizes some of the requirements in terms of domain, in terms of technology are going up, and it's best to leverage multiple different options and get the best out of them rather than just restrict options and probably not being able to fulfill all the promises that we're talking about in BPS 4.0.
Arko, when I'm talking to GBS leaders, I'm no longer surprised when they tell me they have a portfolio that's 50% in-house and 50% outsourced. So GBSs have embraced that, and that hybrid conversation is certainly in play here. Okay.
And yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about technology, right? This again underscores that point that it will assume a central stage in terms of implication, right? And among different forms of, again, tools, technology that we see it, individually they are important, but collectively they're really, really important. Collectively, they create the value which is inherent in BPS 4.0. That's why even when we did this survey, clearly the majority of them believe that this digital capability platform that is going to be most important than the individual components.
Okay, great. Let's move on, and we're going to go through this next section quite quickly. Arko, we got talent here. Obviously, something I know you pay a lot of attention to. Let's look at it in terms of a quick look at talent supply, talent demand, and organizational structure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we move to the next slide, what we are seeing is the demand for talent is becoming more difficult because the nature of talent required will be very different going forward. We already talked about higher order skills, but probably what is more important and has a much more bigger implication is talent needs to be multidimensional in terms of the skill that they have. But just having tech skills or just having problem solving skills or just having the right process skills will not really work anymore. It needs to be a combination of problem solving, technology, experience, process, and industry, and very importantly, emotional intelligence and empathy. All the experience that we talked about that needs to be provided to customers and all stakeholders, not really possible without having that emotional intelligence and empathy. So in a sense, the talent that will be required is becoming more difficult. On the other hand, we see talent supply to be somewhat easy, right? The size of talent pool is likely to increase because now with people working from home, with the hub spoke edge model that we talked about, vast untapped talent pools are likely to open up. Using contingent or temporary workforce will help fill some of those niche skills somewhat more easily. And diversity again becomes very important, right? Work from home, flexible working hours enables women to become a much bigger part of the workforce. That brings in a lot of untapped skills and that brings in a huge portion of the workforce, to actually start working. So now, if we combine this talent demand and supply, right? Demand is increasing, talent supply is also increasing. But if we combine both of these together and sort of go to the next page, the net result is unfortunately that there will still be a talent shortage, especially for some of the higher order skills and some of the multidimensional skills that we talked about, because the demand will outstrip the supply. And we did some, research around here. We took two examples, one on the contact center or customer experience side, where we saw that, going forward, some of the big gaps will be in the empathy or emotional intelligence and problem solving. And similarly, we did detailed research on the insurance side, and as you see, multiple areas, lots of gaps, whether it's actuarial or underwriting, some of the analytics pieces. So again, something that really needs to be taken in mind and sort of be solved for, because this will be one of the key factors in terms of whether the promise of BPS 4.0 gets fulfilled or it really slows down.
And the last part here is really, as we kind of think about the impact, right now, again, most of this is kind of measured in terms of cost to serve, real dollar value. But the way we see it is BPS impact and the evaluation will be based on a holistic set of dimensions, right? Yes, cost will continue to be a part of this, but not restricted to it. Stakeholder experience, business outcome achieved, right? Some of those things will kind of feed into as organization seek to evaluate and capture the BPS 4.0 value proposition. And if I were to kind of again summarize the entire set of implication, clearly we are kind of bullish on this industry from a growth perspective, as we talked about. And it's very important that the engagement between enterprise and BPM providers undergo a fundamental shift, and it needs to. Else, the strategic value that we're talking about, it can't be captured. So that will, we believe that will shift. Technology, goes without saying, will assume or has assumed a center stage, but no more around not the bespoke, piecemeal approach, but in a more composable digital capability platform kind of approach. Impact, as I mentioned, measured in refreshingly more holistic fashion, not kind of tied to just the cost part of the equation. And of course, as we talk about all the tech, we ought to again remind ourselves that talent will continue to remain and actually become much more important in the BPS 4.0. The dimensions and the nature of that is changing, will change. But talent right, is going to be very, very critical as we think about BPS 4.0.
All right, fantastic, Arko and Rajesh. Thank you for the insights on BP 4.0. And what I wanted to do is give our audience members, those that are from enterprises, those that are buyers of services, and if you're interested in getting a little bit of a sample of our data, a little bit of a sample of insights from Rajesh, Arko, and others on the team here, would love to open it up here. That allows you to click the poll here to ask us to get with you, and we'll provide you some more detail on some of these different BPS segments. So contact center, finance and accounting. If you'd like to have a review of that segment and a discussion about what are the implications for your organization, click the link there, and we'll be back with you via email and set up a discussion to have that forward. So I'll end that in 2, 3, 2, 1, and again, love to have a direct conversation. The best way to see you get more is to talk to us. So anyway, let's do question and answers. And Rajesh and Arko, I see pages and pages of questions here. I'm going to try to pick a few of these, and we'll do it. And if we don't get to all of them, we'll certainly try to send personalized responses afterwards. But Rajesh, how is BPS different than BPO? I know when I started, it was BPO, and the words change. What does it mean?
Well, the BPS and BPO, or sometimes we also hear the word BPM, right? They are used interchangeably in the industry. For this particular, research and presentation, when you talked about BPS, it kind of encompasses both third-party services as well as the GBS, the GIC, the shared services construct. But it essentially, a lot of times BPO, the O part is focused on outsourcing, so that's the kind of distinction. For us, when we talk about BPS, it is a kind of in a wider scheme of things.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna answer the next question, but I'm gonna turn it over to Arko to give a less sarcastic answer or a little different perspective. So, would you agree that the COVID has accelerated some of the work, return to work to onshore models with no plans to put it back offshore? And let's be honest here. The offshore is not changing. The value propositions are still strong. There's not only the cost savings dimension, but there's also the talent availability. I think there was some movement back for call centers. Specifically, we heard about some people saying they were having failures on their call centers when the contact centers themselves went down and the work from home didn't work so well in some locations. But the vast majority, what I'm hearing, is not moving things back onshore. Arko, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, there are some doubts and there are some yeses and no's over here. But even if we look at something as basic as cost, which has started off in BPS 1.0, again, if I look at India as a location, work from home unlocks the talent in some of those tier 3, tier 4 locations, right? It's not just those hubs that are important anymore. And second, and very important, is those multidimensional skills that we talked about. Not all of them will be available in onshore location. You really need to cast a global net to get those right skills in.
Yeah. And I think I'm thinking of a specific client conversation I had, and I think it's absolutely true. Is work from home just validated the fact that you don't actually have to be in the corporate headquarters building, or you don't have to be in a specific location. You can do it from anywhere in the world. And so what that caused people to start to rethink, or is causing people to rethink, if my target model was 50-50, it looks like now we can move it to 60-40 or 70-30 without impairing the level of service in terms of how we're interacting as teams. And so I think work from home actually accelerated the ability to think about this on a global scale.
Yeah, in fact, I would add, the technology and the progress of technology is also going to enable the work from anywhere, right? And we already see that, but as technology becomes all the more sophisticated, some of the context that you need to have for the organization, though they also tend to get demystified, which again aids into work from anywhere. And when work from anywhere, ultimately, again, you think from cost and quality perspective, cost and talent perspective. So,
okay. All right, there's another question here. I think it's a little bit long, but I think it's a really good question. So the major platform providers are trying to address these same topics. How do you see the importance of BPS providers versus the platform providers in the future? And why don't we just stop there? But what do you guys think about that one? Platform providers versus BPS providers.
We may need to kind of understand what we mean by platform providers, right? So, whether we are talking about the likes of SAP, Salesforce, or we're talking about, when we talk about like the Google or Amazon or what we call the hyperscalers, right? Let me kind of assume that platforms are basically the tech or the product providers. I'm just making that assumption because probably we won't have opportunity to see clarification. Honestly, I don't see this to be again a kind of a or equation, but I see that to be an and equation, right? From what we are seeing is BPS providers themselves are creating those close, partnerships and relationships to co-create the value for enterprises, right? A lot of the platform providers themselves leverage BPS providers for some of their own internal, services, and then in some of the places like content moderation, if you take platform providers as like the Google and Facebooks of the world, I mean, they are the biggest consumer of BPS services. So the short answer that I'm trying to kind of give here is we see more of ecosystem, more of close collaboration coming into play. It's again, even if we talk about, let's say, automation providers, right, who are supposed to kind of kill the BPS. Today, what is there is most of the big automation providers have very close collaboration, have their dedicated services and arms to kind of go and unlock value for enterprises.
Yeah, I think it's an and equation there, and I think I look at the amount of innovation that's happening in the industry on the tech platforms, or actually, it's not happening in the tech platforms. That the innovation's happening around the tech platforms, and I think the tech platforms are struggling to how to bring it into their ecosystem, or they bring it into their platform itself with all the innovation that happens around the outside, and so that's their primary focus. And the services side of the equation is it's not going to go away. I mean, it has to be there. They need that. They need all the help they can to do the integrations and the consolidations and the rationalizations of portfolio and the platforms themselves. So, okay, all right, we're out of time. I want to thank everybody for their participation, and we're here to help you in any way that that makes sense. And so, feel free to reach out to us. And if you want us to be in touch, our emails will be available. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael, Rajesh, and Arko. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. Again, you will receive a follow-up email within 1 to 2 days with a link to download the presentation slides, along with accessing the on-demand playback of today's live session. On behalf of Everest Group and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.